You have been very supportive of many Democratic candidates in the 2024 election. In fact, you helped pen a letter to then candidate Kamala Harris, urging her to discuss policy, not to mention your support of Democratic candidates running in congressional races. So through that lens, how are you feeling about sort of the evolution of the party on crypto issues?
Well, I was very frustrated during the Biden administration that we couldn't get more Democrats in support of crypto. You know, Congressman Wiley Nickel, who just left Congress, I just recently had a conversation with him. He spent a lot of time last Congress educating congressional members, getting them on board. And I think we made a lot of headway last Congress. This year is just April. We've seen a few bills pass on a bipartisan basis. But I'm very frustrated that it looks like some Democrats are going to use crypto as a pawn against the administration. I get that, there's a need to push back on the Trump administration, but using crypto as a sword is not the pathway, especially since the earliest and largest adopters are working class, communities of color, young people. And those are the people who are the casualties of war when Democrats use, crypto as a sword.
Of course, many people have been very happy to see different examples of bipartisanship on crypto issues. And the stablecoin legislation that we've been debating this year is sort of a prime example of that. We had the markup of the Stable Act yesterday before it passed committee. We have the competing Genius Act over in the Senate waiting on a full vote. Do you feel like these bills are moving in the right direction?
Well, I think they're being debated, right? Almost 14 hours of debate on the House bill yesterday. That was needed, right? And that was necessary. I will caution, Ranking Member Waters and others to not make this about Trump, to make it about the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. It is founders, it is startups, it is small businesses, it is creators that have created this industry, and they're looking for members of Congress to advance stablecoin legislation, market structure legislation from that lens. I would have preferred yesterday to see Democrats propose amendments to actually focus on ensuring smaller operators can become issuers, right? Looking at ways where we can support entrepreneurs, because we know at the state level, there are a lot of entrepreneurs that have created stablecoin companies. Even when you look at the stablecoin bill that was marked up yesterday, there's a provision to ensure that credit union subsidiaries can actually issue stablecoins. I would love to see Democrats focus on community banks, minority banks becoming issuers, creating a pathway. That's what Democrats out there are looking for Democrats to lead on, not just to be obstructionists just because they're looking for a wedge.
What about on market structure? When you're thinking about developing consumer protections, what are you hoping for, and what do you want to see Congress do there?
Well, I'm excited about market structure. We've needed the rules of the road for a long time. I'm one of those big critics of traditional consumer protection policies because Democrats have approached it from a patriarchy perspective. I think we need risk mitigation for all, not just consumer protection that holds back, people of color, people who have been locked out of the traditional financial system. We need risk mitigation that says, how do we increase access by providing resources for financial education, by making sure that these digital products have financial education built in, have tools, early warning tools that people can actually use to protect themselves. Risk mitigation is something that we absolutely need. We need guardrails, but we don't need to use the patriarchy approach to consumer protection. On market structure, I'm really looking at this whole decentralization test because I want to make sure that it doesn't create an industry where only the largest players can succeed. We saw that with the bit license in New York State, where only the wealthiest companies can get a license. That shouldn't be the case. I argue that for market structure, we need a tiered approach to compliance, to disclosure measures, right? Let's look at what are the small entities, right, that can get licenses, when we look at disclosure, it shouldn't just be the large companies. Because if some crypto companies that are medium-sized or small cannot get a license under market structure, then we're not creating a pathway for traditional small businesses to enter this space. So I think these are the conversations that will make a richer debate, and that's where we should be, those should be the sticking points that Democrats and Republicans focus on.
So, like I said at the top, you've been very supportive, and it sounds like very engaged with the party. Are you engaging with lawmakers at all on these issues, and how so?
Yes, as you shared, I am a lifelong Democrat. I served in the Obama administration. I worked in Congress for Barbara Lee and Betty McCollum. But I will say that in the 8 years that I've been working in crypto, focus on access, focus on inclusions, focusing on advocating for entrepreneurs and small businesses, I've received just as much support from Republican members and Republican staffers. So I will say on these issues, they are bipartisan issues, because I think both parties want this industry to be, supported by small businesses to actually move forward. Now, I will say, I think we have a lot of work to do. The American people are looking to Washington to make the right decisions on a lot of issues. On crypto, the folks I represent in crypto, the folks I advocate for, are looking for Democrats as well as Republicans to understand that the future of money and the future of finance includes digital assets. And how can we make sure that credit unions, minority banks, small businesses, entrepreneurs, creators are central to the conversations around market structure, around legislation. So for me, I'll continue to advocate for these issues. It doesn't matter who's in the White House or who controls both chambers of Congress. These issues still must advance.
Can I get your opinion, or your reaction rather, to some of the moves, the many moves and the big ones that we've seen from the Trump administration? Just, the way he made it such a point of his campaign and really kind of courted this crypto audience. What do you make of the promises that he's made and how swiftly he's moved? Obviously he appointed the AI and crypto czar, David Sachs, a big turnaround by the SEC after Gary Gensler stepped to the side. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, and just this morning we saw that the Senate, has advanced Paul Atkins,
That's right.
Yeah, for SEC chair. So, let's be clear, President Trump's love of crypto only happened recently. Right? During his administration, he was very cool on crypto. And so, but we spent, the last 4 years trying to get both Democrats and Republicans to support crypto, to become more supportive. So as a person who first learned about Bitcoin during the Obama administration, when I served in that administration in 2013, as a person who's been working full-time in this space for 8 years, not 18, I want, all elected officials to support crypto, to see the value, right? So I'm optimistic that this administration, this Washington, is more bullish on crypto, is more positive. I do want to hold this administration accountable. We've seen a lot of activities, right, around, the SEC new task force. We even have a new subcommittee in the Senate Banking Committee, as well as, a new caucus on the House. Those are great all activities. But I'm holding this administration accountable in all its promises to the crypto industry to pass stablecoin legislation. It would be awful for these 2 years before the next Congress to have all this activity and not be able to pass stablecoin legislation. We failed to pass it last Congress when it should have been passed. Right? And then it would be a mistake for us not to make movement on market structure legislation this year. So while I'm optimistic about, the Trump administration's, positive nature approach to crypto, I want to see real action. And for me, that is a signed stablecoin bill and real action. 2 bills on market structure that we can actually debate. That I'll see as success. Everything else is just noise at this point.
Speaking of Paul Atkins and the SEC, what are you looking for there? What are you looking to see out of his leadership and that agency's new approach to this industry?
Yeah, well, the agency has been in good hands. Commissioner Hester Pierce, who's leading the SEC Crypto Task Force, is amazing. She's so thoughtful on the issue, and was even during Gensler's term, where he just hated crypto and would not listen to any sides. So I'm optimistic about Paul Atkins, but I'm more optimistic that, the SEC has been in good hands. I was at the first roundtable that was held by the SEC on crypto a few weeks ago, and just a week and a half ago, and it was a great conversation about this whole Howey test. When does it apply? Should it apply? How do we look at determining what's a security and what's not, and what are security contracts and what are not? And what I loved about that roundtable was that it wasn't full of CEOs. It represented the industry in terms of former regulators, crypto skeptics, founders, and there was a robust conversation about how do we change the game. So excited to have a chair, because it's hard to move things forward. But I think, this SEC is well equipped to actually help lead some of the conversations, and they'll be very essential to market structure as we move forward.
Yeah, defining when a crypto asset is a security has really been such a thorn in the side of so many companies. Final thing for me, so much of this conversation around the need for clarity in the U.S. is not just to allow the industry to flourish, but the idea of businesses and innovation moving offshore has really been a big point of concern. So now, do you think that the U.S. is on a path to lead in crypto innovation?
Well, certainly the national conversation, the national debate is around U.S. competitiveness, right? How can the U.S. lead? For me, it's smaller than that. It's really about how can the U.S. lead, but how can we make sure innovation can occur here? And that means innovation for small businesses, for entrepreneurs, for founders, right? So we can compete, but how can we create an environment where creators and entrepreneurs can compete here? This has been a challenge. You saw the NFT community really boom and really fizzle because of the lack of regulatory clarity. So if we're not advancing these bills with the smallest players in mind, we may be able to compete globally and institutional players, benefit and profit. But if we're not keeping our eyes on the prize, we're going to miss this opportunity to make sure that the smallest players have a pathway to become market leaders. And that's what the American economy is about, right? Last I checked, small business is still the engine to the American economy. And so that's what we have to focus on. Global competitiveness, but small business competitiveness is more important.